Hi, my name is Shreya, and I'll be talking to you about examining the impacts of state laws and policies on gun violence. An overview of my presentation. First, we'll start with an introduction, then we'll move towards my methodology. After that, we'll talk about my results, analyzation, and at the end, my conclusion. My introduction. When talking about our nation, a prominent problem is gun violence. With more frequent cases over the years, there has been more reports on mass shootings, school shootings, domestic violence, homicides, and more importantly, suicide. State laws have a big impact on gun violence, as a federal law can only imply specific laws, yet it's up to state up to determination about how they can allow their residents to use guns. Stricter the gun control is, it can lead to fewer shootings, and vice versa. If the gun laws in those states are more lenient, it can lead to more frequent shootings to occur. An article called What the Data Says About Gun Deaths in the U.S. by John Gramlich, they say about 47,000 people alone were killed in gun-related deaths in 2023, and 58% of those gun-related deaths were from suicide, 38% were murders, and the rest were either from law enforcement, accidental or undetermined circumstances. What the federal law says about gun violence is that any person who is the age of 18 can purchase a firearm, specifically a shotgun or rifle. It is up to the state whether they can allow 18-year-olds to either buy a handgun. A handgun is different from a shotgun or rifle. Shotgun and slash rifle are typically considered long guns. They're held with two hands, and they're usually used for recreational shooting or hunting. Handguns are typically much smaller. They can be held with one hand. They're more portable. So with this, it's up to states whether they can either let an 18-year-old even purchase a handgun alongside rifles and shotguns, or they have to be 21 to purchase a handgun itself. When talking about laws, a lot of times our government is split into two political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, and they're also considered like conservative or liberal. So with that, since that has an effect on gun laws, I think it was important to even take a look at a map of the conservative liberal index about how each region is kind of divided. You can clearly see in the South and in the Midwest, they're more conservative compared to the Northeast and the West Coast, they're more strictly liberal. The darker the red is more strictly conservative they are, and the darker the blue is how strictly liberal they are. Now this index was made on 6 measures: stances on gay marriage, guns, abortion, legalization of marijuana, and extra things. So this led me to my research question on how do considered state laws and policies influence and contribute to their effectiveness in gun violence compared to liberal gun state laws. So this also led to my hypothesis that conservative states have least effective gun laws compared to liberal states. Now moving on to my methodology, I want to before diving deep into my research, I want to explain how I conducted this research. So before this, I want to explain what a meta-analysis is. A meta-analysis is a synthesis of data from multiple independent sources addressing a common research question. So step 1 of my methodology was to gather state-level information and state laws, as well as cases reported within those states, such as gun-related deaths. Step 2 was data analysis. I will analyze the data examining trends and correlations amongst when laws were implemented before and after related to the gun-related deaths. And step 3 was my analyzation method. Lastly, I had to interpret and find a correlation back to my research question about how gun strength really correlates with the conservative liberal states. So these are my results. Looking through, there's over probably 50 different policies on gun laws. To really concise this, I took 3 main gun laws that had more of an effect in a public setting. Those 3 gun laws I chose were legal age to own a handgun handgun/firearm, a permit to carry a concealed weapon, and a universal background check. The first policy was having a permitless carry of firearms. This map shows which states have a permitless carry and which states have a permit carry. The green states are permitless and the yellow states are permit carry. The difference between permitless and permit is that a person who is living in a permitless state does not require a permit in public to have their gun on them. Compared to the yellow states, they do require special legalization to have their gun out in public. This is another map, states that have raised the minimum age to purchase a handgun. The blue states on this map shown over here signify that these states only allow ages 21 and above to purchase a handgun, yet by federal law, obviously 18-year-olds can still be able to purchase a handgun or rifle. So really the minimum age was really debated on handguns specifically. The states that are not blue, which is like in the Midwest and southern regions, have maintained their minimum age at 18 to buy all sorts of firearms, including handguns. Lastly, for background checks, this map also shows which laws have implemented the universal background check. The blue states implement universal background checks on all public and private sellers. It is a mandatory check before purchasing a firearm. However, the gray states, it's not that they don't have a universal background check, it's just that when a person is buying from a private seller, they are not required to do a background check. But if a person is buying from a licensed seller, they still have to do a background check based off federal law. So with this, with technicality, people can start buying from more private sellers to avoid background checks. And this is a graph of the United States map showing the firearm mortality death rates. The deeper the red is shows how much higher the mortality rates are. You can see that majority of states like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, they are very deep red, meaning they have much higher mortality firearm rates compared to states like New York or Pennsylvania or New Jersey. So being able to see how each laws are implemented through region and seeing the mortality rates, we were able, we can see the similarities of how gun laws are implemented simply by their conservative or liberal. And to even dive deeper, I decided to look more into specific data, and I decided to take one strictly conservative state and one strictly liberal state to get a better understanding of how to really compare the laws and effectiveness. So the strictly conservative state I chose was Texas, and the strictly liberal state I chose was New Jersey. To begin, Texas state laws state that the legal age to own a handgun is 18. There's no need for permit to carry a concealed weapon, which was effective since 2021. This is very recent. But prior to this, they had an open carry law, which was effective 2016. Open carry law was basically allowing residents of Texas to carry out their concealed weapons with a basic permit. However, now they don't need this ever since 2021. And they also do not need background checks required. Again, this is through private sellers only. Licensed sellers still need to conduct a legalized background check. In overall ranking, Texas is ranked 32 in gun law strength with a gun violence rate of 14.9, which is slightly higher than the national average, which is 13.7. And they're ranked for the weakest gun law strength within the nation. Next are New Jersey state gun laws, state laws. The legal age to own a handgun is 21 in New Jersey, and everyone requires a permit to carry a gun, and it requires a thorough background check. Now, especially with New Jersey, when they're conducting a background check, residents also have to go through specific training and classes to even be able to purchase a gun. New Jersey, however, is also ranked 6th in gun law strength out of the 50 states, and they have the amongst strongest gun laws implemented, and they have one of the lowest rates of gun-related deaths. There's compared to the 4.6, the national average is 13.7, so it's severely lower. Now moving into my analyzation, the stats say that overall gun rates in Texas increased by 44% in 2013 to 2022, and firearms for the leasing cost of deaths from ages 1 through 17 in 2022 as well. And from years 2013 to 2022, the gun suicide rates have also increased by 28%. Now looking at a graph here, it kind of clearly depicts the incline of gun-related deaths. On the side, the y-axis is measured by 100,000 people, and on the x-axis is by year. So we can see a gradual incline each time. However, if you can't notice, there's a slight spike or increase on 2016 when the open carry law was implemented, and a really large spike around 2021 when the permitless carry was also implemented. So you can see the gun deaths have started to increase when residents had more freedom to carry their guns out in public. The New Jersey statistics show that the rate of gun deaths actually decreased by 13% from 2013 to 2022, and the rate of suicides, however, increased by 10%. And that is compared to the national 18% in suicides throughout the nation. And gun homicides have decreased by 24% compared to the 70% of national increase. Now over here, this graph also shows how gun-related deaths have were first at an increase and slowly went on a really steep decline. However, since these laws New Jersey gun state laws were really implemented a long time ago in the 1990s, 1980s, these laws have been implemented for a long time. So even though there's a slight increase, that can also be influenced by the national gun rate increase throughout the whole nation. However, I want you to notice that compared to Texas, New Jersey gun rates are far less lower, seeing that it does not surpass 5 per 100,000 people on this graph. But when you look at Texas gun-related deaths, it actually surpasses even 15 by 100,000 people. So there's over a huge gap of deaths being related to gun-related deaths. So my conclusion, we fail to reject our hypothesis. Due to conservative states, they have weaker gun laws than liberal states, which are leading to higher mortality rates, as we have seen throughout the graphs and data. And we need to figure out a way to really start a really steep decline in gun mortality rates. And essential laws are really important to protect our citizens. So I feel like increasing legal age of owning handguns would be very essential, as now people, instead of having an 18-year-old have a handgun, we can allow more mature people to be able to purchase a handgun from ages 21 and above. Ensuring proper trainings and giving to all gun owners before purchasing a firearm is very important. Doing no background check and not giving enough training, you can't really trust a person and their intentions with a weapon. And considering that even with New Jersey's stats being decreased for gun mortality rates, suicide was still increasing within Texas, New Jersey, and overall in the nation. So really, even implementing mental health screenings, a more stricter mental health screening can also reduce gun mortality rates. And stricter laws regarding purchasing of a gun would also decrease in gun-related deaths. It should not be very easy to just hand out a gun to anyone and anyone can walk out on the street. So implementing more stricter laws will lead to less gun-related deaths. Thank you.
Okay, oops, my glasses. What was one obstacle or challenge you encountered while implementing your research method, and how did you address it?
One obstacle or challenge when I was conducting this research is really looking at the big majority of it. Our nation has 50 states, and it's a lot of information and a lot of data, and I could possibly not have gone through every single state to see really if conservative really has an effect against liberalism. However, I was able to manage that if I were to find a more generalized data regarding with the laws that were implemented similarly and gun-related deaths. which I was able to do through those graphs I showed in the beginning.
Thank you.
So I was wondering, how did you decide what piece of evidence was going to be presented first?
I decided to start with generalizing my data first because ensuring that I'm not trying to make a biased claim is very important. So to understand that to even implement the idea of conservative versus liberal, I needed to see the similarities between state laws that were being implemented between the regions, which you could see, which were very similar on the map, as well as their rates of deaths, which can also show a correlation between the strength of their laws and the deaths. So I think it was very important for me to first talk about the general population of the nation before diving deeper with a strictly conservative state versus a strictly liberal state.
If you had 3 more weeks to work on this, what additional research strategies or methods would you put into practice?
Additional research methods I would have put into it was looking at more variables of effects of gun laws and gun-related deaths. I know there's a lot of other variables that can impact these numbers, such as race and racism, because a lot of times people can say that other races can be more targeted to gun death or gun victimization compared to other races. So I would do a more deeper dive in a meta-analysis or